Yes, so I'm passing it to you, Gary, to introduce our speaker tonight, and we'll all sit back and enjoy a trip to Florida.
Okay, well, let's see. So despite Stan's comments, I'll try to be real quick here. Good evening, everyone. For return viewers, welcome back. And for those that are joining us for the first time, perhaps friends and followers of our guest speaker, welcome. It's our ongoing effort to try to make the most of Zoom's potential. And so our special guest tonight is Stan Lavender, a birder and professional photographer who is on location, if you will, from Central Florida tonight. And through his wonderful photography and stories, he's going to share his experiences there and take us on a virtual tour of one of the truly great birding areas in the country. I'd like to quickly note that in a previous chapter in his life, Stan spent 35 years as an aviator, both for the Navy and as a commercial airline pilot. He holds master's degrees in both education and national and international security, which no doubt relates to his military experience. So I'd like to pass along a quick heartfelt thank you, Stan, for your service. Much appreciated. And then with that said, it's my pleasure to turn the floor over to our special guest speaker, Stan Lavender.
Thanks, Gary. Let me see if we can get the hardest part done first. We'll see if we can share this screen. If you see it, you should see it now. Okay, well, hi Spokane, and also to my friends and birders everywhere. Thanks for joining this virtual tour of Central Florida. Although Orlando area is an outstanding theme park destination, don't count on seeing many theme park photos tonight. Don't get me wrong, Disney is a great place to visit. Let's see if it'll advance. Well, we got the first slide up. There we go. But this is a virtual birding vacation. I will show you dozens and dozens of species, and most of them not occurring in the Spokane area. And I'll talk about a few of the experiences I've had along the trail and relay some interesting facts too. By no means am I going to try to cover every species in Central Florida. Okay, hop on your virtual jet, buckle your seatbelts for the 2,300-mile trip from Spokane to Orlando. Hey, welcome to Florida. Florida is more than 5 times longer than wide. If you traveled from Pensacola in the Panhandle to Key West at the southernmost tip, you would drive 850 miles. But in Central Florida, traveling from the Atlantic to the Gulf of Mexico is only 150 miles. Okay, here's our game plan. For fun, I'll reference our birding destinations from Disney World. Our tour stops are designated with red stars. As we prepare to depart, I'll mention a couple of things about my background. My life can be summed up as things with wings. You know, birds, butterflies, dragonflies, and airplanes. Most birders have a spark moment. For me, it was when my family erected a bird feeder and the northern flicker started coming. Yeah, I know, only a flicker. But for me, using my Golden Book Nature Guide to Birds, I had made my first identification. I still have that book. My childhood home backed up to a 20-acre arboretum, and exploring this area led me to pursuing the Boy Scout Bird Study Merit Badge. I bring that up now because I'm going to talk just a little bit about that Bird Study Merit Badge again later. Eventually, I had to make a living, and as Gary mentioned, I was lucky enough to pilot things with wings for the US Navy and later commercially. Combining wings with photography seemed to be a natural. I had cameras all my life and joined photo clubs in junior and senior high. Now that I'm fully retired, photography and birding fit nicely together. I'm one of the leaders of a local birding group and a member of 2 photography clubs. Since moving to Florida from New England, several of my winged photos have been picked up for digital magazines and journals. A few very colorful dragonflies for the covers of the Dragonfly Society of the Americas journal. And yeah, who knew that dragonflies had their own publication? And a few dragonflies for the Trail Traveler by Rails to Trails organization. And a few of my ribbon winners from the Florida Camera Council Club's competitions. Okay, let's start the tour and let's go to the beach. We'll start our tour on the shores of the Atlantic Ocean and work westward to the Gulf of Mexico. All the photos in this presentation were taken and edited by me, with the exception of 5 clearly marked slides, courtesy of the Avian Research and Conservation Institute in Gainesville, Florida. All of my photos are copyrighted and the ARCI requires written permission to use their material. Our journey will take us about 45 minutes, and we can do Q&A at the end if you like. Our first destinations are the Black Point Wildlife Drive and Canaveral National Seashore on Merritt Island. It's 60 miles from Disney, but really worth it. The 7-mile wildlife drive is amazing. In season, November to April is the best time to visit. To date, 357 species have been ID'd in the refuge, and it would be feasible to see 75 plus in any single day. After the wildlife drive, we'll get some sand in our shoes. The reddish egret is one of my faves and always a target bird when visiting. The reddish egret is the rarest wading bird in the United States. The Florida population is about 350 to 400 pairs, with about 125 in the Florida Keys. But you can see them along most of the Gulf Coast all the way around to Florida. They have several foraging strategies, including running or dancing across the water and holding their wings out to provide shade to attract their prey and use their feet to stir up the bottom. Reddish egrets eat primarily small minnow-like fish, but occasionally will eat shrimp and crabs too. These are roseate spoonbills, and they are magnificent. You can see these spoonbills on both coastlines and in between, but this is probably the most reliable location to see this bird, and often in high numbers. I've seen 50 plus in flocks during the winter. I just wanted to make sure you got a close-up view of this incredible bill. They forage in shallow waters, typically less than 5 inches deep. They sweep their bills, opened left and right through the water, feeling and looking for crustaceans such as shrimp and prawns and aquatic insects and fish. Once they feel their prey on their bill, they snap it closed. A roseate flyover always gets my attention. Just like many other species, roseate spoonbills get their pink coloration from the foods they eat. The crustaceans and other aquatic invertebrates contain pigments called carotenoids that help turn their feathers pink. The roseate spoonbills, just like humans, may go bald as they age. Of course, instead of losing hair, they lose feathers from the top of their head. If you look closely at the photo on the left, you can see the bald patch. Here's another bird with an amazing bill, the northern shoveler. I believe you get this one in the Spokane area too. The bill is big, about 2.5 inches long and shaped like a shovel. But that odd shaped bill also has about 110 fine projections along the edges that act like a colander. It filters out tiny crustaceans, seeds, and aquatic invertebrates from the water. Here's the female. Northern shovelers are monogamous and remain together longer than most other pairs of dabbling ducks. This cinnamon teal drew quite a few curious birders when it showed up with a flock of blue-winged teals. We don't normally get cinnamons on the East Coast. Okay, enough driving. Let's get our feet into the Atlantic Ocean. Here's a look at the camouflage of the ruddy turnstone. These guys are long distance migrants. They breed across the high Arctic along rocky coast and in the tundra. Turnstones are very fast flyers. When covering the enormous distance from their breeding to their non-breeding grounds, they average between 27 and 47 miles per hour. Young turnstones take their first Arctic flight when they're only 19 days old. Then, 2 days later, they start their southern migration. To make matters even worse on the 3-week-old bird, their parents have already departed by this time, leaving the youngsters to make their first migration on their own. Here are just a few more photos of these incredible species. In Florida, we see 2 species of pelicans, the brown and the American white pelican. Typically, the white pelicans are inland and an occasional visitor to the coast, and browns are just the opposite. The hunting techniques of these 2 species tend to be quite different. The whites will cooperatively herd prey by swimming together in unison, then dip their heads and giant bills underwater to collect the fish. The brown is much more of an individual hunter and usually employs a plunge dive from varying altitudes. During the dive, the brown pelicans tuck its head and rotates its body to the left, cushioning the trachea and the esophagus, which are located on the right side of the neck from the water impact. Brown pelicans are really a success story for wildlife conservation. They nearly disappeared from North America between 1950 and early 1970s because of pesticides entering their food chain. The Endrin killed pelicans outright, while DDT contamination led to thin-shelled eggs that broke under the weight of incubating parents. In 1970, brown pelicans were federally listed as endangered. The plight of the pelicans and other species led to a ban on DDT in 1972 and a reduction in Endrin use. By 1985, numbers along the Atlantic and Eastern Gulf Coast had recovered enough for them to be removed from the endangered list. The marbled godwit. Well, shorebirds have some of the most interesting bill shapes. The godwit plunges its 5-inch long, slightly upturned bill deep into the sand to pull out aquatic invertebrates like crabs and clams. Short-billed dowitchers are most often seen near the beach, while the long-billed dowitchers are seen inland, seldom on the beach. Most of the shorebirds we see on the Atlantic coast, we see on the Gulf Coast too. So we'll see more shorebirds when we visit the Gulf of Mexico. No visit to Florida would be complete without seeing the iconic Florida scrub jay. Although you can see scrub jays on Merritt Island, our next stop is almost a guarantee. And it's only a few miles away. It's the Lyonia Environmental Center. Note the scrub oak habitat that is essential to their existence. Their population estimates are between 7,700 and 9,300. This is a very unique species. The Florida scrub jay is a cooperative breeder. When the offspring leave the nest, instead of going off to raise young on their own, they stay with their parents. They help them raise next year's brood. Working together, individual family members take turns watching for threats while the rest of the family looks for food. Their alert calls can differentiate between airborne and ground threats. If a dangerous hawk is seen, the lookout gives one call. If a snake is seen, there's a different call. Florida scrub jays don't migrate and rarely move more than a few miles from where they're hatched. They don't like to move across areas that aren't scrub oak. Increased fragmentation of their habitat means that Florida scrub jay populations are now very isolated. Despite being separated by less than 100 miles, jays from the Atlantic coast, Central Florida, and Southwest Florida have different vocalizations. Now, off to the land in between the coastlines, we will take a look at 5 destinations on the interior Florida peninsula. There's Disney World at the bottom. Our first stop is only 20 miles north of Disney World, and it is the 11-mile Lake Apopka Wildlife Drive. If you prefer to walk or even bike, it has miles of trails too. Apopka is a Seminole word meaning potato eating place. This lake has an area of 48 square miles and is the fourth largest lake in Florida. The North Shore is known for its bird population. Annually during the holiday season, the one-day Audubon Christmas bird count is conducted. During the 1998 count, there were 174 species identified. That was the highest species total for an inland count in the 115-year history of the CBC. The total all-time list of bird species here has exceeded 362. You will see dozens of ospreys here. Their diet is 99% fresh and saltwater fish. The ospreys are incredible anglers. In recent studies, ospreys caught fish on at least 1 in every 4 dives. To enhance their fishing abilities, the outer toes are reversible, which allows them to grasp the fish with 2 toes in front and 2 behind. Barb pads on the soles of their feet help them grip slippery prey too. Here's an adult and a juvenile black-crowned night heron. The young leave the nest at about a month, but can't fly until they are 6 weeks old. They move through the vegetation on foot, joining up with foraging flocks at night. Fulvous whistling ducks in the United States can be found from Florida to Texas. They started breeding in the US only in the late 19th and early 20th centuries following the start of rice cultivation. In the 1960s, pesticides applied to the rice caused declines in the Texas and Louisiana populations. Their numbers have recovered and stabilized since then. Most of the Texas and Louisiana birds migrate southward, but Florida has a year-round population. The great blue heron is very common in Florida, and I usually see them every day. They will eat nearly anything within striking distance. They grab small prey in their strong mandibles, as you can see from the photo on the left, and use their dagger-like bills to impale larger fish and amphibians like the greater siren on the right. Thanks to a high percentage of rod-type photoreceptors in their eyes, great blue herons can hunt day and night. This little female vermilion flycatcher caused quite a stir in the Orlando area. She's a very rare visitor to the interior, but like many members of the tyrant flycatcher family, vermilion flycatchers are prone to wander from their normal range in the Southwest and Mexico. They are reported sightings as far north as British Columbia and as far east as Newfoundland. Before we motor on, here are a few more of the regular suspects. I love the flexibility of the tricolored heron's neck, reflections of the snowy egret and the pied-billed grebe, and a belted kingfisher who looks ready for takeoff. In season, there are literally thousands of American coots, common and purple gallinules, and hundreds of glossy ibises too. Just a little less than an hour north of Disney is the 55-plus community of the Villages in my hometown. The community is famous for golf with more than 693 holes, more than any other facility in the world. The footprint is huge. It's approximately 20 by 15 miles. That's an area of 300 square miles with a population of about 132,000. For comparison, Spokane is 69 square miles with over 231,000. Fortunately, the Villages developers created a fair amount of green space with preserves, trails, and lots of lakes and wetlands. Here are a few photos of some of my favorite birding areas. If you get here early enough, you may see sunrises like one of these. Yep, these are the actual sky colors. There are many trails, which are excellent for folks with limited mobility too. The boardwalk over this preserve's wetlands provides a special opportunity to get up close to nature, and many breeding pairs can be seen here. There are 2 large birding groups in this community. The 15-year species list has passed 260 birds. Let's take a look at some of the species in the area. These eastern kingbirds were shot last May. The hungry juveniles were amazing. For similar east-west species like kingbirds, I'll try to point out a few field markings for ID purposes. In this case, you can see the eastern has a darker head, white throat, breast, and tail band, as opposed to the western kingbird that you get out in Spokane, I believe, with its gray head and throat and yellow breast. The same habitat that kingbirds like is also prime eastern meadowlark country. eBird liked this photo enough to select it as their pick for the highest quality photo submitted in Sumter County, Florida in 2020. The eastern is almost identical to the western meadowlark. The easiest field markings are the darker crown stripes and the white mustache. I've seen both species and they are actually very entertaining. It was super exciting to see these two whooping cranes in the wild less than a year ago. As you know, they are endangered. In 1941, there were only 21 whooping cranes left. 15 were migrants between Canada and Texas, while the rest lived in Louisiana. The Louisiana population became extinct. Today's population is estimated between 600 and 800, with about 2/3 in the wild and the rest in captivity. All of these birds are descended from the small flock that breeds in Texas. It's believed that these two in the photo are siblings from the Florida Reintroduction Program. That program stopped in 2008 for various reasons, but the Louisiana Bird Reintroduction Program continues. Well, unfortunately, on January 2nd of this year, as the whoopers were returning to their early morning feeding grounds, one collided with a power line. As you can see, it was very gray and misty morning, making visibility limited for the cranes. I've brightened these photos just a bit so you can see the wires. After the collision, the whooper fell straight down under the wires. Fortunately, it was able to stand. Obviously stunned and confused, the bird started to wander onto the road and into traffic. At this point, the concern was that it might be hit by a speeding car. One of the other birders drove her car into the center of the road to stop and slow the traffic. After 3 or 4 minutes, the stunned bird returned to the bank. After another 5 minutes, it gathered enough strength to fly a short distance into a field. Still stunned, it stood there for more than 30 minutes, not feeding or moving. Fortunately, since that day, they have been regularly observed and are okay. Well, one of the great things about photography is that it captures a moment in time. When you see a photograph, it brings back memories. That's what these pics from March of 2017 do for me. Every time I enter this preserve, I look to where I observe these American kestrels mating. Our smallest falcons needed only 5 seconds to complete this entire mating sequence. The embedded metadata on the photos records every detail, right down to the second. In September 2017, Hurricane Irma brought down this tree, but the stump remains near the entrance. So I'm sure you're thinking that was 4 years ago. Any kestrel updates? In February this year, I was greeted by a pair of kestrels near where the tree once stood. Now, I don't know if these are the same ones or not, but kestrels can live up to 15 years, so it is possible. Okay, do you see the behavior of the female in the right photo with her tail raised? The male saw it. Okay, 6 seconds this time. I won't point out any more mating slides, but if you keep a sharp lookout, you may see 1 or 2 more. Even though I see sandhill cranes every day, it is always a pleasure. We get thousands of sandhills in Florida and most migrate, but we have a large permanent year-round population also. Here's a young sandhill colt. This pair of adults has been nesting in the same area for several years. In general, sandhills will start breeding between 2 and 7 years. They mate for life, which can be more than 20 years. They stay with their mates year-round too. The juveniles stick close to their parents for 9 or 10 months after hatching. They produce one brood per year and the clutch is 1 to 3 eggs, usually 2. Typically, only one survives to fledge. These pics are from January this year. There were 2 eggs in the nest. The incubation period was about 30 days. The first one hatched out on February 3rd. Unfortunately, the second egg didn't make it. In as little as 8 hours, the newborn colt can leave the nest. This photo was taken 1 day after hatching with the colt circled in red. The adults will continue to feed it for quite a while. This is the next day. It will take 65 to 75 days after hatching for the colt to fledge, and it did in April. Just to let you know, sandhills have been in Florida for a very long time. Sandhill fossil remains unearthed at the Macus Fault shell pit near Sarasota are estimated to be 2.5 million years old. These photos show the colt at 2.5 weeks. Growing up quickly helps with their survival. And here you can see the adult dropping a grub into the grass in front of the colt, who then picks it out of the grass and eats it. Well, I mentioned that Boy Scout bird study merit badge at the beginning, and here's the payback. I was standing in a preserve parking lot with my binoculars strapped on and carrying my camera and tripod over my shoulder. A multi-generational family was getting ready to enjoy the preserve too. The grandmother approached me and asked if I knew anything about birds. I confessed I knew a little. She told me her grandson was a Boy Scout who was working on his bird study merit badge, just as I had done at his age. She asked me if I'd give him a little help. Well, of course, and it was really a lot of fun. Well, let's pause to talk about what else is out along the trail. As I tell most people, there is at least one gator in every small to medium pond and more in larger ponds. If you don't see them, it's because they don't want to be seen. As a birder, we are generally looking up, but every once in a while it pays to look down too, especially when an alligator decides to share the trail with you, as the one in the lower right did with me recently. Lots of other wildlife too. Keep a good lookout. These snakes are both non-venomous, but we have our share of venomous ones too. Well, this doesn't have wings either, but as a birder, I'm betting you are a nature enthusiast. This is the northern river otter. Don't be fooled by its cuteness. It's a wild animal, and I recommend giving them plenty of space. The 2 photos on the right were taken just a week ago. Here are a few courtship slides of the hooded mergansers. It's really hard to describe how incredibly thrilled I was to see this display. For some reason, the previous night, I was reading about hooded mergansers and a description of their courting behavior, thinking, gee, that sounds cool. But even though I've seen thousands of hoodies, I've never seen this. Well, the very next day, I was walking along the trail, and right in front of me were 4 mergansers in full courtship mode. Check out the male's hood extension. Do you think the females were impressed? Their most elaborate display is called head throwing. The males jerk their heads backwards to touch their backs with crests raised while giving out a frog-like croak. The females court by bobbing their heads and giving a hoarse gack. This went on for about 30 minutes, and I feel really lucky to have finally seen this amazing display. Here's another species whose range is mostly throughout Florida and along the Gulf Coast. This is the male anhinga in breeding plumage. His eye ring turns an incredible blue. In the upper left photo, you can see a non-breeding male without the blue eye ring. The bottom left is a female or an immature male with a long, light-colored neck and head. Unlike most of water birds, the anhinga doesn't have waterproof feathers. When taking a break from underwater hunting, you are likely to see them with wings spread out to dry their feathers. This sequence of an anhinga played out right in front of me. The majority of the anhinga's diets consist of small to medium-sized fish. They swim slowly underwater, stalking fish around submerged vegetation. They spear the fish through the side with their straight bill. In the left photo, you can see it looks like the fish is going to go down very quickly, but not so fast. Falling back to the ground twice, the anhinga managed to recapture the fish each time. After lots of flipping and repositioning, it finally got its meal. This is an early morning shot of a male and female pileated woodpecker. I'm pretty sure you get these in the Spokane area too. The pileates are very territorial, and this pair can be seen or at least heard on most days. I watched this male over several weeks last April. He diligently excavated the large nesting cavity in a hole of a dead pine, or in a dead pine. The male does most of the excavating, and the female contributes with the final stages. The entrance hole is oblong rather than circular, like most woodpeckers. For the finishing touches, he climbs all the way into the hole and chips away from the inside. The nest construction usually takes 3 to 6 weeks, and nests are rarely reused. If the female approves the nest, it will be used. If not, that's a lot of work for nothing. Apparently, she didn't like this one. Okay, there's a nearby barred owl pair that has been very successful for a few years. From left to right are the owls from 2019, 2020, and 2021. This is my favorite barred owl story. I was desperately looking to get a shot of the new owlets, but I was having no luck. A woman and her granddaughter came along and asked me, "Hey, what are you looking for?" And I said, "Owlets, but I can't find them." The young girl of about 10 looks up, points, and says, "There they are." Sure enough, up near the top of the tree were the 2 owlets. Now, meeting people who are enjoying nature is always a great part of the story. Well, just a short walk away is a great horned owl and a few new owlets. This was the first year of finding these guys. Fortunately, a friend mentioned her sighting of the adult in this area. So I got my camera and went searching. One of the best ways to search isn't always scanning the trees, but to examine the trail or bushes for poop. Then it's time to carefully scan the tree branches above. To my surprise, staring at me were 2 owlets. There are more than a few successful great horned owl pairs nearby. This pair has been using this nest for the last 3 years. The photo on the left is from 2021. The other 2 photos are from 2019. Well, unfortunately, 2020 was unlucky for them too. A large branch fell and the eggs were destroyed. Most folks around here feel fortunate that the adults returned to the same tree to breed in 2021. They had 3 owlets. The Audubon Eagle Watch is very active in Florida. There are over 1,500 nesting pairs in our state. The program spans 45 counties and monitors over 800 nests. Here are shots of the same eagle from different days. In the one on the left, it's carrying a fish, and on the right, it's carrying a cattle egret. It's headed back to its nest. Well, there are 2 nests circled in red, but do you think the eagle's nest is on the left or right photo? Well, you got it if you pick the power line towers. Man-made structures like these power line towers are being utilized in increasing numbers due to loss of suitable nesting habitat. The trees on the right are the home of the very successful great horned owls that we just saw. The tower and the trees are separated by only 600 yards, and I took these photos from the same spot by turning 180 degrees. Always hungry, the 2 eaglets are waiting for their meal. When the fish arrives, one adult starts feeding the eaglets while the other one flies off in search of more prey. If you look closely, you can see what happened to the cattle egret. The blowing feathers in the breeze look like a mini snowstorm. Here's one of the youngsters stretching their wings. Well, sometimes things get carried away. Early in the morning, one of the juveniles was either blown off the nest or perhaps just testing its wings and couldn't get back. So it glided to the ground. The adult eagle kept watch, but so did concerned birders. By the afternoon, it was very clear the juvenile was unable to return to the nest. That's when trained bird rescuers helped to get it into the lower branches of a nearby tree. Initially, the rescuers provided food to a very hungry bird. Luckily, the adult eagles resumed feeding the next day, and early on the third day, the juvenile had gained enough strength to return to the nest. It's always great to have a caring and trained group of birders handy. Well, we are off to visit Silver Springs, which is one of the 175 Florida state parks. While you are looking for birds, you might want to look out for monkeys too. They don't belong in Florida, but we have a group of 400 rhesus monkeys, and they've been here for nearly 90 years. Some of you may remember the Tarzan movies of the 1930s. They were filmed here. Depending on who you believe, the monkeys were either escapees from the 1933 filming or intentionally released by the manager of the jungle cruise boat ride at Silver Springs. Well, enough about monkeys. Let's take a look at some of the birds. Well, you need to come east of the Rockies to have a good chance of seeing red-headed woodpeckers. I watched this nest for nearly a month last July. The male selects a site for the nest hole, and the female may tap around it, possibly signaling her approval. They nest in dead trees, in this case, a pine snag, often selecting ones that have lost most of their bark, creating a smooth surface that may deter snakes. Here, one of the adults is cleaning out the waste from the nest. The clutch size varies between 3 and 10 eggs. Incubation and nesting can take up to 45 days, but usually a little less. I estimated that there were 3 eggs, but I only saw 2 fledge. The adults returned numerous times, sitting on the nest edge, offering food inside the hole, but never got a response. It's mealtime, and this chick was the first to fledge. This is a few weeks later after it fledged, learning to forage. Summer tanagers are always worth a look. In this case, the golden yellow, the female, I think is stunning. And here are a few more likely candidates that I don't think you see too often in Washington: the pine warbler, the blue grosbeak, and the eastern towhee. Okay, we're going over to the Withlacoochee State Forest now. Withlacoochee is the native word meaning crooked river, which actually describes the river's 70-mile journey to the Gulf of Mexico. The forest is huge, and we are only going to the citrus tract, which encompasses 50,000 acres. I relearned an important lesson here. I was looking for a lifer, the endangered red-cockaded woodpecker. I researched online and knew a general area of where to look, but the actual search area turned out to be overwhelming. After 3 consecutive days of searching without any luck, I was departing for home. As I neared the exit, I spotted a ranger. I pulled in and asked if she had any reported sightings of the red-cockaded woodpecker. She asked me if I had seen the pine trees with the white painted rings. Well, I said, sure, all over the place. And well, she told me those are the identified nesting trees. Lesson relearned: always ask the ranger for directions first. I went back down the road, and 10 minutes later, I took these photos. Well, this was another 3-day adventure in the Withlacoochee forest, looking for another lifer for me, the purple finch. This time I had great directions to where the finch had been spotted, mostly from Paul, who's watching tonight. And finally, on day 3, at long distance, I saw it and got a few pics too. With no one else to celebrate it, I actually did fist pumps in the air. I was very excited. Here are a few others from Withlacoochee: a northern flicker, yellow shafted edition, also white-eyed vireo, and a downy woodpecker. Now we are headed for our northernmost destination near Gainesville, Paynes Prairie State Park. If you want to see snail kites in the United States, you need to come to Florida. Snail kites are listed as endangered federally and by the state of Florida. True to their name, snail kites feed almost entirely on apple snails or other exotic snails. The snail populations are tied directly to water conditions. Here's some fascinating information about this at Payne's Prairie. In 2017, 0 snail kite nests were reported. In 2018, there were 4 nests. In 2019, it jumps to 70 nests. In 2020, a little fewer, and in 2021, even fewer. So what's happening? Yes, the water levels were changing. In the fall of 2017, Hurricane Irma crossed this area and created long-term flooding. Snail populations dramatically increased, and the kites followed their food source. Here are a few photos of the snail kites in action. This is a male, slaty black except for the white band across the tail. It takes a male 3 years to acquire this dark plumage. The female and the juvenile males exhibit very similar plumage, heavily streaked and also with a white tail band across the tail. Once a snail is spotted, the fight is on. This truly makes for spectacular viewing. With favorable weather and winds, I was so close that I didn't even need binoculars or a long telephoto lens. Well, let's say goodbye to the snail kite and take a look at another kite. The swallowtail kite. I've got a long list of favorites, and this one is near the top. Much of our knowledge and basis for future conservation efforts can be credited to the amazing findings of the Avian Research and Conservation Institute in Gainesville, Florida. And I thank Gina Kent of the ARCI for sharing her knowledge about the swallow-tailed kites. Just like other species, the swallowtail kite suffers from loss of habitat. Their 21-state range pre-1940 is now reduced to the area you can see on the right. The ARCI began tagging swallowtail kites in 1996 with small satellite transmitters. With many recent technology advances such as newer GPS and cellular tracking, real-time data is now available. The lightweight GPS trackers are attached in the field in less than 45 minutes. Their migration was beyond anything imagined. 5,000 miles all the way to South America, with extended flights over the Gulf and Caribbean. The spring and fall migratory routes require 40% of their total year. Here's a look at the actual tracks of several birds. Much of their crossing depends on favorable winds. The crossings can take up to 3 days across the sea, which is about their maximum endurance. Beyond that, it's likely that the crossing will be unsuccessful and the bird may be lost at sea. Well, here are a few photos I recently shot. The 4-foot wingspan and swallowtail contribute to their maneuverability and skill in capturing flying insects. Adults eat their food while flying, rarely perching during the day. This kite is about to catch a small insect circled in red. Check out how tiny its feet are compared to most raptors. This kite has found a paper wasp nest. In Florida, kites often return to their own nest with whole wasp nest, eat the larvae, and add the insect's nest into their own. Their stomachs are thicker and spongier than the average raptor, allowing them to eat many stinging insects. Now, I think it was enjoying a little snack while returning to the nest. Well, we made it to the Gulf and just a few more places to visit. You really can't go wrong anywhere along this coast. And it's a fairly short drive from Disney. Fort DeSoto, our first and southernmost point, is a county park. This park is one of the first points of land many returning Central, South American, and Caribbean migratory birds that come to. They desperately need to refuel before continuing north. Cerulean warblers are uncommon here and strictly migratory. So March and April are some of the best months to see them passing through. Their populations have declined 72% since 1970. Some estimates indicate that half of the remaining population of 570,000 could be lost by 2021. Loss and degradation of habitat of the breeding and wintering grounds appears to be the primary reason for the decline. Conservation efforts aimed at reversing these declines are focused on forestry practices, such as long rotation timber extraction and selective logging to create natural canopy gaps and uneven aged forest stands. The black-throated green warbler is an untiring singer. One male was observed repeatedly singing his song 466 times in only an hour. So, knowing the songs and calls of the male will increase your chances of spotting one. Typically, they are high in the canopy, moving quickly from branch to branch. The black and white warbler is the only member of the genus Miniotilta, which means moss plucking, a reference to its habit of probing bark and moss for insects, as you can see it doing here. This is a nandate parakeet, formerly known as the black-hooded parakeet. Originally, it was found in the central interior of southern Brazil to northern Argentina. Unfortunately, it has been popular in the cage bird trade. Many nandate parakeets escaped from captivity and have established a large feral population in the Tampa Bay area and also around Los Angeles. Now, one more chance to get some sand in our shoes. In the next few slides, we will look at some of the plovers and sandpipers. I love seeing these species, but I've got to tell you, it's good to have a field guide handy. These small ones can really be difficult to ID. This is a piping plover. Recently, researchers discovered that more than 1/3 of the piping plovers population that breeds along the Atlantic coast spends the winter in the Bahamas. This snowy plover was almost invisible at 30 yards. Snowy plovers even nest on open sand areas. Young snowy plovers leave the nest within 3 hours of hatching and can forage unassisted almost immediately. Semi-palmated plovers breed in northern Canada and Alaska and winter along the coastlines of the southern US and into Central America and South America. They forage in quick running dashes followed by pauses to look, listen for signs of prey. The black-bellied plover is the only American plover that has a hind toe on its foot, but the toe is so small, it's hard to see it in the field. The spotted sandpiper has a fascinating social life. Females take the lead and males incubate and raise the young. The female is the one who establishes and defends the territory. She arrives at the breeding ground earlier than the male. Some, but not all females may practice an unusual breeding strategy called polyandry, where the female mates with up to 4 males. The female may store sperm up to 1 month. The egg she lays for one male may be fathered by a different male in a previous mating. Oh, this Dunlin has to feel better after this stretch. The Dunlin name comes from Dunling, the earliest known English name of the species, which dates back at least as far as 1531. Dunling is a compound English word, dun meaning gray-brown, and a diminutive ling. Another long-distance migrant, sanderlings breed, excuse me, they breed in the high Arctic and then winter along the coast of the US, the Caribbean, and South America. Although both willet parents incubate the eggs, only the male spends the night on the nest. Willets can feed both day and night using the sensitive tip of their bills, not just eyesight. The laughing gull is the only gull I've included, but there are plenty of other gull species in Florida. The breeding adults have black heads, white eye rings, and a red bill. In the late 1800s, nesting colonies were nearly eliminated in the northeastern United States by egg hunters and further decimated by the plumage hunters for the hat trade. Fortunately, now their population is over 525,000 and increasing due to protection. Like many gulls, the laughing gull takes 3 years to acquire adult plumage. There is a juvenile in the bottom left. Of course, the breeding and non-breeding laughing gulls have different plumages too. On the right is the one in breeding plumage, and the other two photos are ones in non-breeding plumage. Let's talk royal terns for a few minutes. Here you see the breeding plumage on the left and the non-breeding on the right. In late summer and fall, royal terns molt. Most of their black crest shows a white forehead. Here's a sequence that I captured this spring. The two in the foreground are showing courtship behavior. Now, royal terns tolerate others well, except during the height of courtship, when males are prone to squabble with each other. Often these courtship displays attract the interest of a third tern. This leads to some aggressive behavior. Yes, this is a three's a crowd routine, even though the second male is offering the female a small, fresh fish. Further discussion by the males made no difference. She would have no part of the second male. This is a black skimmer, and it has many folk names in North America where it's been called the scissorbill, the shearwater, the sea dog, the flood gull, the storm gull, the razorbill, and the cutwater. Although black skimmers can be active throughout the day, the best time to see them in action is dawn and dusk. You see the green band on this juvenile black skimmer? Well, meet B99. Well, here's a plug for the U.S. Geological Survey Bureau and their North American bird banding program. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this important program. This is a certificate I received for reporting B99. About 60 million birds representing hundreds of species have been banded in North America since 1904. About 4 million bands have been recovered and reported. The data helps to monitor populations, set hunting regulations, restore endangered species, study effects of environmental contaminants, and address issues like avian influenza and bird hazards at airports. Plus, it's fun to know where and by whom B99 was banded. To be part of this program and get a certificate, use the www.reportband.gov. Well, the sun is setting on our virtual Florida birding vacation. As Disney might say, I hope you had a magical time. If you weren't counting, there were 69 species of birds. And don't forget the 5 dragonflies, the otters, the gators, the snakes, and spiders too. Well, if these are the kind of things you enjoy, then I hope you will turn this virtual vacation into a real Florida birding vacation. Here's where we were tonight. And my information resources included allaboutbirds.org by the Cornell Labs of Ornithology, several Peterson field guides, the National Audubon Society's Field Guide to Florida, the National Audubon Society's website, the Avian Research and Conservation Institute, Birds of Florida by Bill Prenti, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and the U.S. Geological Survey Bureau. Well, I hope you enjoyed it, and I would be open to any questions about what you've seen, or about Florida, or photography, or even Disney World. So thank you very much.
Well, I first want to just say that was spectacular. Tremendous number of photographs that I just, wow, that's amazing. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I know a lot of folks are on vacation right now, being the weather is cooled off. I'll as soon as we get the recording up, I'll make sure that we get everybody else to look at it as well. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Gary. It was a pleasure
Thank you.
and an honor to
Thank
be
you,
able
Stan.
to present this.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. What was the best time you would say to visit?
Uh, it depends on what you want to see. We obviously the most species will be probably from, I would say, November through April, or maybe October through April. But there are occasionally some other birds that if you want to see. So something like the swallowtail kites, if you want to see them, you've got to come in the summertime. So, you know, you can take your pick. I mean, you'll see a number of species in the summertime. Our local clubs do a July birding challenge just within our community, and the winners usually get about 85 species. So we still have a lot of species here. I mean, you know, but it's not going to be like the best time over, you know, the migratory season when we get all the migrants from what we call the snowbirds from up north. So that would be the best time in my estimation to come.
I wanted to comment that in August, I was up in Fairbanks, Alaska, and it was just the beginning of the migration of the sandhill cranes. And so they had a sandhill crane festival that was going to start the day after I was there. But I don't know if you can see this. I took a picture.
Oh, I can see it. Great.
Yeah. And so that was fun. And then I also wanted to mention that I have a girlfriend who lived in Sun City Center, Florida, and she belonged to the Audubon Society, and I stayed with her for about 3 weeks. And the Audubon Society, we went out and kind of cleaned up a trail where people would go, and I saw a bright yellow snake about 5 feet long on the trail. Have no idea what kind of snake it was, but it was sure pretty. Just bright.
Yellow rat snake.
Is that what it was?
Yellow rat snake, I believe, is what we have. It's fairly common here.
Okay. Yeah, it was very pretty. And
Mhm.
it
There.
didn't move at first, but then I moved and then it slithered away. So I was excited to see it.
Well, the ones that aren't poisonous are a lot more fun to see.
The rat snake isn't, right?
No,
No,
no.
it's non-venomous.
Yeah.
No, I've
Okay.
had a couple times when I've been out on the trail and and I was focusing on something, and it was something on the ground, and as I was focusing, a coral snake came right through the view, and I go, oh my gosh.
Wow. Yeah.
It was always interesting.
I'm actually going to go to Florida and visit that girlfriend and another one because she lives on the Gulf side. And then another friend lives on the Atlantic side, and she's 10 miles south of Cape Canaveral.
Oh, that'll be great.
So isn't that island that's in the Atlantic near
Yeah,
the,
I think she might still be on Merritt Island, or she'll be on one of the other barrier islands there.
she's not on an island. She's right on
Oh, then she'll
the,
be right. She'll be right on the shore. Yeah.
she's on the shore, but I could say, Carol, we're going to go to this island.
Yeah. If you just Google Black Point Wildlife Drive, and that would be the drive. And then if you just want to go to the beach, there's any access to the beach, you stand a good chance of seeing some of the other birds.
Okay, great.
But there's a nice visitor center there too that you should go to as well, and they'll give you information about what's been cited recently, and hopefully everything's back open by the time you get here, because we've been struggling just like everybody else in the country. But I think they're starting to reopen, and hopefully we'll get there.
Hope so.
How rare are indigo snakes?
The eastern indigo snakes are extremely rare. I visited there's I'll try to remember the name of the institute. I visited an institute not far from here that is doing a reintroduction program, and they are raising the indigos, and they have reintroduced them. They have a couple of sites in Florida, Georgia, and I think it was Alabama where they're putting them in, but they're the largest non-venomous snake in the Southeast, and hopefully they'll bring them back. They're really good for the environment. They're one of the few snakes that will actually attack and eat a rattlesnake here. So they have just amazing. But it was I had a fun visit. They were a little bigger than what I wanted to handle, but but I had a great visit. Yeah, they were very interesting.
Texas is still a good place to see them. They're harder, much rarer here in Florida.
Very hard to find here.
Any other questions for Stan? We've had about 30 people tuning in tonight, Stan, and about half of them have left the building at this point. But it was fantastic. I had one final question. Do you sell your photographs?
I make them available to people at a nominal, whatever my cost is, and so if people like to do that, I've had a number of friends and followers ask for some of them, and before COVID, we did an annual show. One of the large photo clubs here did an annual show where things could be purchased, but in general, I don't try to market them.
But they're very good.
Excellent.
Thank you.
You can tell that you spend a lot of time in the field. It's just a real pleasure to see all your pictures.
Well, thanks, Gary. It's certainly been a pleasure.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much. It was a wonderful presentation. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
Yes,
I am
Stan.
new with Audubon. I hardly know the names of anything. I was going to mention that I did see a beautiful golden bird on my sunflower, and he was just sitting on top and then eating the seeds. So poking his head down to pull the seeds out. It was really cute. And so I was thinking it was probably, I don't know what it was, but it was a beautiful bird.
Probably a goldfinch.
Yeah.
Or
Yes.
state bird, Washington state bird, the goldfinch. Yeah.
Well, like I said, I'm brand new and I've got a lot to learn. So
We're glad you tuned in.
Absolutely.
thank you. I've
Yeah.
enjoyed it.
And there's always more to learn.
Yes.
Oh, always.
Yes. Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
So back to the photo question, Stan, do you have a website?
I used to, but I decided to take it down.
Oh, okay.
But
So we'll just, if you're interested in your photos, we'll go through the contact information Gary has on you.
that would be fine. I'd be happy to help.
I love
people.
that. The kite with the snail kite. Wow.
They are
phenomenal
beautiful,
photos.
beautiful birds. They really are.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you so much, Stan. It's been a real pleasure, and I really think that this is the potential of Zoom to be able to do these types of programs. I didn't really think about it, but September is when a lot of our folks are off, doing their traveling, and I should have planned better, but like I said, we will have the recording up on the website here shortly, and I'll make sure that I steer everyone to it. Thank you.
Well, thanks. Again, I enjoyed doing it.
Yeah.
Thank you.